We've looked at sleepers for category leagues, but what about for points leagues? That's what we're going to tackle today, and Michael Bolton has got all of the information just in his top pocket. Michael?
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NBA fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and people can come up with statistics to prove anything. 40% of people know that. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter, as always, at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Now, through to September the 22nd, all FanDuel customers who place a $5 bet can get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free, and we are available on all platforms, so give it a double bang and a thumbs up, and leave all your comments down below. Like I said, last week we did sleeper videos for category leagues, and now it is time for points leagues. So if you're playing in a points league, welcome, this is for you. If you're thinking about playing in a points league, this is also for you. There is going to be, as per usual, Locked On Fantasy Basketball Bowl will be starting up, and we'll be taking all of the applications next week. But there'll be a points league format for that. Last year we had, how many did we have? 30 leagues of 12 teams. We'll see how many we get this season for points leagues. So be on the lookout for information about how to join those in shows coming out next week. We will probably almost definitely do another Fantasy Basketball Points League sleeper video in a few weeks' time, because ADPs change, rankings change, information changes with injuries and all that sort of stuff. But this is our one that we're doing now on the 9th of September, and I do worry that either of these sites, Yahoo and ESPN, that we're doing might just change things straight after this. And I think this happened last year. Didn't ESPN sleeper show, and the next day they adjusted rankings? And that could happen at any day, at any point. So just be aware of it. So what we're going to cover is Yahoo. We're going to cover ESPN. We're going to cover sleepers, again, a term which is a terrible term and a bad term, because, again, if you are seeking out to watch a show like this, the vast majority of you watching these shows, you know who every player is. You know the majority of situations. Not everybody does. Not everybody does. And that's why I welcome all those people, because someone asked me a question yesterday and said, hey, you say that Onyeka Okongwu's ADP is rising, but what sort of impact is Alex Sarr going to have on him? My answer, of course, was nothing. He plays for a different team. But not everyone is across all of that sort of stuff. So while some of you may say, yeah, that's obviously a sleeper and that's obviously wrong, it's not to everybody, because the rankings exist and the ADPs exist, and I think there's some outrageous positioning of players that makes no sense, and I don't really think there's any way you can actually argue any of these positions, but they're there, and someone believes in them, so I guess there are sleepers for some people. Let's get in and talk about Yahoo. You'll be absolutely stunned, shocked, flabbergasted to know that there are fewer guys they look at as sleepers on Yahoo than ESPN. Stunning. And that is, I will, stay tuned for this. If you want a teaser to hang on to for the rest of the show, I'm going to say something good about ESPN later on. So just be ready for that. I will say something good about them. We're talking Yahoo here. My general criteria, which I don't know if I've ever said before, when I'm looking at these sleepers, or value picks is probably a better way, just less sexy way to say it, is that if I see where a guy is ranked, I look at rank and I look at ADP, and often they're the same and sometimes they're not. But if I can see a player being about 2 rounds better than that number, or for those of you who don't play in 12s, and I do have to get away from that default nomenclature of 12 teams, because by the way, if you join a Yahoo Prize League now, I believe they default to 10 teams, which is, honestly, so stupid. But whatever. Yahoo, stupid. Fix it. They won't, but that is what the default's to now. So I've got to get away from that nomenclature. So it's about 20 to 25 spots minimum is what I look at in terms of valuing players. Now, in category leagues, that can be very different because of the ways of evaluations and all that, and puntings and all that sort of stuff. But in points leagues, it does become more straightforward, because we're just looking at who do you think is going to average more fantasy points. So if I see someone who is ranked or has an ADP sitting at about minimum 20, 21, 22 spots is usually what I look at behind where I have them, that's where I consider a sleeper. For a lot of people, majority of people, that's 2 rounds. For some of you, it might be a round and a half. But I think it's enough to consider that a decent enough value situation. So let's look. Let's start with 5 names on Yahoo, and I'm going to just throw the obligatory one out immediately here. I think there is some value in taking Ben Simmons with your last pick. Do I have any faith in this whatsoever? Nope, not at all. Yahoo's got him ranked at 199 though. Always remember what this is. 156 is a 12-man player, a 12-team league player. That's how many players get rostered in a 12-team league. It's 156. 14 is 168. So when you're looking at 199, you're not quite looking at a 20-team league, but you're looking at it on the fringes of a 16-team league. And I know that if Ben Simmons does play 27 minutes a night, he'll be a 12-team league player. But who knows? I don't. But we take flyers in the last picks, and Simmons usually is an easier guy to build around in a points league because, again, we don't have to worry about the deficiencies. Like, do you give me 25 fantasy points? Thank you. I will take it. That's what it is. I've got Scooter Henderson here as well. Sterling sits with a rank of 175, again putting him out of the purview of 14-team leagues, which is an insane position to have him. Insane. And an ADP of 135. Remembering, Yahoo rank, X rank, is a fake number, and I say fake in a way that is probably not the correct way of doing it. It's for an imaginary situation. A situation where you are playing a hybrid of category and points leagues, trying to split the middle between the two formats, and failing spectacularly in that way of doing it. Now, I'm not even saying that Scoot's rank of 175 makes sense in that because he's draftable in all formats. But remember that with Yahoo, the rankings they put up and then the ADP does get influenced by that ranking is something that's supposed to be a combination of points and categories, which, if you can find me the one person who plays a combination category points league, like, it's going to be the first that I've ever seen, and I'd love to talk to that person about what other problems they've got going on in their life. But Scooter with a rank of 175 and an ADP of 135, I love it. Jeremy Sohan. We all can get hung up on, man, they played him at point guard. Hey, that was stupid. Yep, cool, didn't work that well. He's ranked at 185 with an ADP of 146. I'll take it every day of the week. I think he's closer to 100 than 185, honestly. And then we go to Washington. Now, the rookies have had some very weird, as that comes up at the wrong thing. The rookies have had weird rankings all through this process over on Yahoo. Alex Sarr ranks at 197. A lot of the rookies were ranked in the 500s because they just didn't bother to do it. Didn't bother to put him into the list. I'm not saying that I think Sarr's going to be awesome. I don't think any of these rookies are going to be awesome, but I think he's one of a handful that we take a flyer on. And again, 197 suggests that in a 16-team league, you would just leave him on the waiver wire, which I do not believe that you would. So I think Sarr, yes, some terrible numbers in Summer League. He's not the best in the fantasy point-producing situation, but he probably has the clearest path to 30 minutes of any rookie outside of him and Ricochet, really. So to me, he's got to go there. And then we go to PJ Washington, the Mavericks starting power forward, who is wildly inconsistent. We know this. And a rank of 193 suggests, again, that you just shouldn't touch him, which is, I just think, blatantly incorrect. I would find it very difficult for anybody to argue against, honestly, the 60 names that we're going to talk about. Is it 60? How many names do we actually have on this show? I think we've got, you know what, we'll figure it out later. I think there's more. I think there's about 70 names that we're going to talk about on this show. I'd find it hard for anyone to argue with any of those names, but maybe you do. If you find a name that you argue with and go, no, actually, that value is fine, drop it in the comments. But PJ Washington at 193? Crazy. Ridiculous. What are we doing? I know what we're doing. We're being inaccurate, but that's where we're at. Let's go to another bunch of... Oh, should we do that? No, let's not go there yet. Because I'm going to tell you that today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Maybe you have the curiosity to look into the fantasy ranks and understand that maybe some of them are wrong. As you get older, though, your curiosity dies off. Your ability to take up new hobbies, or not your ability, your passion and drive to take up a new hobby disappears. It floats away. Because as kids, we have a high level of curiosity, but it gets harder when you're an adult. Therapy is a great way of trying to figure out ways to better yourself. Right? It doesn't always have to be, I am so sad, I need to get therapy. That's a part of it. Mental health and mental illness is a part of it. But sometimes it can just be, can I just do something better? Can I make the quality of life for me and people in my life and family? Can I improve that? Therapy can help you discover that curiosity again. Find a new hobby. Work out ways to schedule your time so you're able to do some things that help broaden your mind and rediscover your back-to-school era. It's entirely online, BetterHelp, so you don't have to worry about going to an office. You just fill out questionnaires online, you meet with your therapist, they match you up. If it doesn't work, you get a new one. You can just change until you find the person who you jive with. So rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That is BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, now let's get into the next batch of Yahoo sleepers. Don't forget to check out the rest of the shows on the Locked On Podcast Network, including Locked On NBA and our live 24/7 Locked On Sports Today channel. I was guilty in one of my mock drafts, it was a category league one, of letting Andrew Wiggins go undrafted, and I really don't think that should be the case. I don't know whether Wiggins is going to be a starter on this Warriors team. I just don't. Like, there's a lot of different ways that they can go about structuring their squad. But Wiggins is ranked at 175, again suggesting that even a 14-team league, you just leave him alone. And historically, he's always been a much better points league guy than category league guy. His ADP is 140. That is insane value. Karis LeVert ranked at 169. Giggity with an ADP of 147. In the future, I don't think things are going to go particularly well for Karis in terms of where he sits in an NBA roster, maybe the season after next. But at the moment, he is the primary backup guard for the Cavs. It's not Amani Bates. It's not Craig Porter. It's him, behind Garland and Mitchell. His rank is 169, and even in a points league, I think he's like 120th, 115th, maybe, even as a reserve. Got Rowan Barrett. And you know that I have loved Rowan for a very long time. I think he's been an awesome real-life contributor and fantasy player for so long. And now he's just finally getting his just desserts. And of course, that's a lie because I haven't liked RJ Barrett as a player or as a fantasy contributor, but I have always liked him more in points leagues. Now, I do like him much more in category leagues this season, but this is where the dual approach, the half-assing two things instead of full-assing one thing with the rankings becomes a problem because the Yahoo rank has him at 101, RJ Barrett. The ADP has him at 101, and that's great. But that's nowhere close to touching the sides of what his points league value is. He's closer to touching top 50 than being outside the top 100. So there is tremendous value, I think, in looking at Rowan Barrett, and that is not a sentence, well, it probably is for points leagues, but that's not a sentence I've been very aggressive in uttering out loud over previous seasons. I love what he did in terms of changing the shot mix. Who knows if he finishes at the rim at the same level that he has versus what he did last season. I don't know whether he will continue to do that, but I also don't care at 101. Brandon Podziemski is the next one we'll look at. He's at a rank of 135 with an ADP 128. Silliness, what are we doing? I'm very certain he is going to start. I'm not buying the 8 to 10 3-pointers made per game, but I am buying it means a large role. He is probably a top 100 points league player who you are just still getting at a discount, and I don't think that discount will last forever. He played 27 minutes a night last season as a rookie, and Clay is gone, and yes, Hield and Melton are there, but I do think Pods can maybe get six extra minutes a night, and I am interested to see it. The bucket, his teammate, John Kuminga. This is, again, one of those ones where Kuminga is nowhere near as good of a category league player versus points league. He lacks some of the peripheral stats, but in a points league, that doesn't matter. He's going to score quite a bit. He probably gets second highest usage on this team, and that pushes him to the, let's say, top 70 at worst. He's ranked at 105. I wrote ADP twice there. He's ranked at 105 with an ADP of 97. It's just insane value. You're cleaning up. You're getting Barrett at 101 or Kuminga at 105, Podziemski 135, Wiggins undrafted. These are insane values to get these players who are, in this sort of a format. This is Yahoo default scoring, of course. And when we do ESPN, it's ESPN default scoring. Just amazing value there. You're well aware also that I have been very, very down on Russell Westbrook as a real-life contributor and a category league fantasy producer. I've been down on him for the last few seasons because I try to adjust my ideas based on what we currently see versus him being my favorite player back in 2013. But Westbrook ranked at 148 with an ADP of 142 in a points league doesn't make a lot of sense. Their guard depth is terrible. Like, you can say that Westbrook may not be very good, and I would agree with you, but Christian Brown, Julian Strouder, Jalen Pickett, these are the guys who would be battling him for minutes. And Jamal Murray's health is not good. This, to me, is an absolute no-brainer, Russell Westbrook. Same as Colin Sexton at 118 with an ADP of 124. I've talked about Sexton in category league shows as well. I think he starts over Clarkson. He might not. I'm not sure. But he was rolling as top 65 at the end of last season. If he plays 30 minutes a night, he absolutely streaks through this number. I love it. I also amazingly like Julius Randle. It is the RJ Barrett. Randle does get... Well, actually, that's not fair because I think Randle gets some unfair category league criticisms as well. He does have some low defensive numbers, yes. And the percentages can be iffy, although his free throws have been a bit better. But for points leagues, his rank at 65, ADP at 65 is crazy. One thing I try not to do on this channel is I try not to get inside other men's heads, Giggity. I don't try to look in and invent scenarios about how they're feeling. I don't try to do that. Hence why I like to provide the cold, hard data on contract years. In the past, I've done it on revenge games. Because people go, well, he's going to definitely want to play better against his former team. Well, he's definitely going to try now that he's got a contract on the line. And someone had a comment to me the other day about Julius Randle. I said, look, don't you think that you shouldn't draft Randle because there seems to be like locker room problems because he didn't go to Villanova with the other guys? Like, honestly, like, I'm not going to sit there and go, what is Julius thinking? Man, I don't have school time stories to tell with these players. Or they're going to force him out to get another Villanova player in. Like, yeah, look, Randall's a weird fit on this team for sure, and he has some negative attributes. But I think if we try and waste our time inventing locker room ideas, decisions, hierarchical stuff, you're going to waste your time, I think. Anyway, Randall sits at 65. In a points league, like, that's not like he smashes that. Even if he went to a different team, he smashes that. What about the big fella? What about the biggest bird, Zion Williamson? He's ranked at 53. His ADP is 51. Now, I get that a large part of that is due to injury concerns. 23 points a game last season. His steals came up. His field goals can actually get better, and so can his usage, even though it was at 30. I think we get more usage from him this season with whatever's going on with Brandon Ingram, even though DeJounte Murray is there. He, to me, is a probably top 15, top 18 per game points league player. That is a big like buffer you were getting given there to like shield yourself from an injury concern. And people still have significant injury concerns about Zion. I do get that. He missed the games in the playoffs after playing 70 regular season games. I get it. I get why you would have some of the concerns. But people also tend to take it too far. I was talking about upsides and downsides, and someone's like, yeah, Zion's downside is that he's out of the NBA after one more injury. Like, that's just not happening. That's part of the reason why ADP and rank pushes Zion to this spot, because there's this perception of that. You take advantage of it. Malik Monk, I don't know what's going to happen with DeMar DeRozan there. With Monk, is he going to start or not? I'm not sure, but I do know that Monk can be around 100th, I would say, even in a bench role in fantasy points. When his ADP is 132 with an ADP of 125, I feel pretty good about him providing value at that position. Let's talk about some more Yahoo Points League legends. Yes, I know that it's very easy for you to crack a joke and say, man, what, are you going to like go back on Jordan Poole after he destroyed you last season? Yeah, that's how this whole process works. I don't hold week-to-week, year-to-year grudges. You would never hear me sit here on this show and say, A, I can't really speak much about this guy. I never had him on my team. B, I'm not going to draft him. I had him last year. C, he was terrible last season. We can't do it again. He burnt me. You would never hear me say that. Never. Because I think it's a really bad way. It's an overly emotional way. And me, I'm not a big emotional guy. It's an emotional way of trying to interpret how the numbers work. And yeah, Jordan Poole had some real weird struggles at the beginning of last season. He was pretty good at the end. And he's ranked at 98 with an ADP of 92. And is there 60 spots of upside in that? unlikely to hit, but I would find it really tough to think that Poole dramatically underperforms a rank of 98 this season. I'd find that really, really hard to think that would happen. But maybe he does. Maybe Jordan Poole, of all people, is just my kryptonite that I can't get over. Maybe. That is possible. I don't think it is, but maybe it's possible. His teammate Kyle Kuzma ranks at 82 with an ADP of 84. He's always been, much like Julius Randle, a better category league player, points league player, because he struggles with percentages, steals and blocks. But in points leagues, he's going to score. He's going to get rebounds. He's getting assists now. Love it there. Siakam, who I believe I had Pascal Siakam on the busts show for categories. But in points leagues, his rank at 54 with an ADP of 52 is immense thievery. He's probably a top, let's say 30 player at worst. Probably top 25 in Indiana. Maybe top 20. It's the difference. He is, again, the player. Like Kuzma, like Randall, like Banchero. The guy who doesn't get steals or doesn't get blocks, and his percentages can be pretty iffy at times, one or both. But he scores and he gets rebounds and he gets some nice positional assists. And that is good for points leagues, and the hybrid ranking system fails yet again. Ja Morant is ranked at 42 with an ADP of 34. Much like with Zion, I'm guessing and I'm hoping that he is put at that spot because people are worried about an injury, valid, or another suspension. Sort of valid, probably less valid, but possibly there because this is a top 15 points league player per game, like without too many concerns for me. And the last one is, again, the player that I have historically loved, Cam Thomas. His minutes, I don't know. What do you think increases more, Cam Thomas's usage or minutes? He has 31 minutes last season, 31 usage last season. Which one of those two do you think increases the most this season? I'm a bit torn on it. I'd say it's probably usage, but I reckon they both might increase a similar amount. Now, I'm not banking on his defensive stats or his rebounds or anything like that, but he's going to do more, I'm guessing. And that rank at 79 or 72 for Cameron just feels too low. And you might say, well, there's a risk there. Maybe he doesn't see that usage jump. The difference between him and a Jordan Poole from last season, because Jordan Poole went from a good team to a bad team, and we thought he'd do more and get higher usage. The difference here is that Cam Thomas doesn't go from a good team, but he goes from a team that was better in the Nets last season, but he's still on the same team. He doesn't have to go to a new team. He doesn't have to go to a new organization. He doesn't have to go and find where he sits in a hierarchy. He sort of knows already. So that is the difference there. So I think that hopefully limits some of his downside. In a category league, his rank at that spot is totally fine. Like in a points league, I think you get value out of getting him there. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. You've heard us talk about FanDuel a lot, rightfully so. They are America's number one sportsbook. There's a little bit something new going on at the moment, though, because all the way now and through to September the 22nd, FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and from YouTube TV. And then with your YouTube TV base plan, you get to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon NFL out-of-market game for free. You need your Google account, you need your valid form of payment, and you can go in there and cancel that at any point. So go to FanDuel.com right now and download America's number one sportsbook, and don't forget to gamble responsibly. All right, probably didn't time that super well because I do still have some Yahoo points sleepers to talk about, but not many. We're getting to the end of the Yahoo section of the show. Got 4 more guys that I want to talk about here. I'm not as big on Denny Avdia for category leagues this season. I think his usage and assist numbers were really spiking in Washington when a lot of guys were out and he was like the number 2, and he won't be the number 2 in Portland. In fact, you could argue he's the 5th offensive option. Simons, Sharp, Grant, Ayton, throw in Scoot there as well. All right? That's sort of where he could fit. But I think that his rank of 144, his ability in points leagues is solid enough to beat that number. I really like Amen Thompson this season, and that's without over-projecting his minutes. I've got him at about 24, which maybe that is a little high. But I think at 127, I do really like that. I got Zubats with a rank of 106 and an ADP of 102. Very, very not invested in Zubats, but I do think we're going to see maybe one of the better seasons from him. And the last one is Chris Middleton, who originally was ranked at 105. It's come into 103. The ADP is catching up on that. There is still the injury risk with Middleton and his knees and now his ankle surgery. But I think that on a per-game basis, he beats this relatively comfortably. And when you're looking at around 100, I don't think you should feel super worried about the downside risk of that. I think it's all right. Now we do ESPN. Now let me tell you the good about ESPN, because I don't want to just come across as if I'm just hating on what ESPN does. In saying that, you should never play a fantasy league on ESPN. The care that they put into it is non-existent. There will be players that start games in NBA games who you cannot add for weeks. It happened at least 5 times last season. Keon Ellis, the original one that comes into my head, and it's not just the ones that happened in April. This was like November, December. There was someone else like insane who wasn't available. Jordan Goodwin, I think it was. Right? They don't care. And we sit here on the 9th of September in the US. It's the 10th here for me. Week 1 of the NFL season's done. Like, fantasy football drafts were done last weekend for the large part. And there are no updated rankings on ESPN at all. You go into a draft room and they are insane. These numbers are absolutely insane for some of them. Now, the good thing that ESPN does is they do have separate category league ranks and points league ranks. So you choose whether it's a category league that you're in or your points league that you're in, or it's a whatever mock draft you do. And the ranks from those particular formats preload into your draft. The ADPs don't. They are a crossover between the two, but the ranks do preload. Now, they're laughably wrong, like inarguably wrong, but they're there. So it's a good effort. It's well done. We're making that decision. And let me just illustrate to you one of the things that I think is the worst example of ranking, not including the Ja Morant 312th that Yahoo put out first, which of course, ridiculous. This one still sits out here. Do you know what it is? Because there's a million of them you could find. Why is Jalen Johnson... I don't even do this. Why is Jalen Johnson ranked on ESPN for points leagues at 172? Why is that a thing? What do you think is going to happen? That they're going to just lean heavily into Mo Gay? What are we doing? His ADP is 127. That's coming off the back of that 172 rank. Jalen Johnson, the man that if you're watching is up on the screen, he's 23 years of age. He averaged 16 and 9 with 3.5 assists, 1.2 steals and 0.8 blocks, and shot 51 and 73. He played 34 minutes a night last season, and DeJounte Murray's gone. He's in year 4, year 2 as a starter, Jalen Johnson. Yet, ESPN suggests that rank at 172 in a setting, ESPN's a 10-team default league. 10-team default league. Like, they're saying here, like, maybe you'd grab him with your last pick in a 14-teamer. This might be a top 40 guy. Inexcusable, inarguable, should be, again, just the clear example of why there is no care paid. Absolute nonsense and foolishness. And I'll be honest with you, I'm just warming up. That is the worst one, but by no means is that the only one, because one spot under him on my list here is Isaiah Hartenstein, ranked at 168. I know that I'm not allowed to swear like I did in the past where I dropped multiple F-bombs. This is one of them, so you can just insert it in your brain. What are we actually doing here? Where are we getting this idea? Yeah, Isaiah Hartenstein is a better player in a points league, in a category league format than a points league. Not really that's not up for debate, I don't think. So why is his ADP at 133 with a rank of 168? Last season, with a usage of 8, without a $30 million... It wasn't 8, it was like 11. Without a $30 million a year contract and out from Tom Thibodeau, old mate Hartenstein averaged 28.6 ESPN fantasy points, which put him 116th. So I guess it makes sense that he'd be 50 spots worse this year. Definitely adds up. So you could almost jump into an ESPN league and grab Jalen Johnson and Isaiah Hartenstein with your last 2 picks, and league's over, you're done. You won it. What's happening? Al Horford's ranked at 187. I know Horford's not as good in points as versus categories. He's going to sit back-to-backs, but that is nonsense. Jalen Suggs ranks at 158. Do we forget he existed? Like, he averaged 26.7 last season. It's not super great. It's fine. It's not super great. It's better than 158th. I expect him to improve. Now, that ADP at 136, you might say that's somewhat reasonable. But it's also in a default ESPN league undraftable because they default to 130. So what's happening? And this is like obviously egregious. We've spoken about Fred VanVleet's ADP on ESPN all season. You can't rationalize this. You can't do it. He's ranked at, I don't know, that says ADP there twice. He's ranked at 83. And apologies if this is you, if you're an ESPN user watching this and you've done drafts already, but there are people on ESPN drafting who are seeing him sit at the top of the queue at number 83 and going, nah, we'll pass because his average draft position is 94. Average. Average doesn't always mean median, but that means that approximately half of the people are drafting him after 94. You ask, what did Fred VanVleet average in ESPN points leagues and where did he rank last season? I'm glad you asked that question because I was going to tell you anyway, but it's good to get that from you. 24th is the answer. 24th. Does this make me angry? Yeah, because you know what? I'm actually really passionate about fantasy basketball and about this sport/game/hobby and providing information and trying to break new barriers in terms of research and the way we approach looking at stuff. It doesn't always... things that I say aren't always right or aren't always correct or aren't always accurate. I do my best at it, but I get annoyed at this because that is indefensible. You cannot defend that. There's no way you can defend that. You can't. How does that happen? It's really, like, it is frustrating to me. The next one I get, like, you've got Bradley Beal sitting at 106, okay? Beal was a frustrating player last season. He was injured quite a bit. He averaged 34 fantasy points, which is good for 84th, and he's ranked at 106. Do you think he's going to be more hurt or do less than last season? I don't. So I like it there. Gafford's ADP is 133. Big Dan Gafford rank at 151. Cool stuff. I don't think he's going to start, but I think he's still got some value there. And then we go to the two Warriors. Brandon Pajemski and Trace Jackson Davis. I spoke about Pajemski already. He's ranked at 132 on ESPN with an ADP of 135. It's that is free real estate as well. So we really do like that one. And then the next one we go to is Trace Jackson Davis, who I don't know whether TJD is going to start. His ADP, his rank both sit at 137. Again, that's an undraftable position on an ESPN standard format. He played only 17 minutes a night as a rookie, and even if he gets to 21 or 22, I think he beats this number pretty comfortably. So this is just one of those ones that somehow was slipped through the cracks. The cracks are gigantic over there, man. There's a lot of cracks happening because there are a lot of players who sit in positions where I just don't think they should. And Derek Lively fits that same bill. He's got an ADP of 144. Sorry, a rank of 144, an ADP of 131. So both him and Gafford are considered non-draftable players. I think they're both draftable. Lively, I do think he's going to play more. But yeah, these are all value plays here. And I know what you're going to say, Josh, that someone will definitely leave this comment, happens every time. Why do you even bother covering ESPN leagues? Their obviously rankings are terrible. Why do you cover them? The reason I do is because, let's say 40% of people still play leagues there. And the people that play leagues, I'll tell you all the things about where I think their rankings are wrong. I'll encourage you to go somewhere else to play. But people play there. And I also just want it to be better. So I'm not going to ignore an ESPN in a pre-draft process. I'm probably going to marginalize what I do because of the lack of care and encouraging you to go onto other sites to play. One of the other annoyances on ESPN, from memory, I don't know if they've changed this, but when you live in Australia and you go to schedule a draft time, you can't do it after like 5 p.m. our time. They go, we've got downtime from 4 p.m. till 11 p.m. Australian time. You go, oh, okay. So can't do any nighttime drafts. Don't know if that's changed, so don't hold me on account to that. Let's go to the next group. I think there's a real chance that Kobe White is a bust this season on Yahoo. He's ranked at 119, or even, on ESPN categories, he's ranked at like 51, and on points, he's at 119. The real answer there is Cody's probably a better points league guy than category league guy, and the numbers seem flipped. His ADP is at 110, his rank is 119, Kobe White. It's just the easiest value, I think, you're slapping you in the face. Emmanuel Quickley's ranked at 151. Undraftable, apparently. In 10-teamers. An ADP of 133. This man might be a top 30 player. He might not be, but I'd happily wager something to tell you that he's going to finish better than 151. Happily do that. Honestly, nonsense to suggest that he would be anywhere near that number. 17-5 last season, including playing on the Knicks to begin the year. 29 minutes a game. That's going to go up. No rationale. Talked about Sohan in the Yahoo section, but his ADP is at 140 with a rank of 150. By the way, ESPN, anyone who has an ADP outside 140 just gets given an ADP of 140. So when you see 140, it usually means worse than that. That's where Sohan sits. Jimmy Harden. I get it. It's easy to hate Harden. I get why. But I'll tell you what I hate. Rankings that don't make sense. He's at number 49 here with an ADP of 46. Like, this man was not that bad last season. And now there is no Paul George and there is no Russell Westbrook. Again, would you like to know where James Harden was last season? Well, he was 41 ESPN points, and that was good for 32nd. So even if we just got the James Harden that we got last season, which was a guy that averaged 17, 5, and 8.5 and only had 21 usage, well, you're going to beat this number by a round and a half. But what if there was a situation where the second highest usage player and the third highest usage player both left the team and weren't replaced? Do you think maybe that Harden could get better? Luckily, that actually did happen. So yeah, I think he's probably going to be able to get better from there. And then we've got the Padawan himself, Colin Sexton, who's just always appearing on these lists. And the fact that he appears in every single thing, where I look at sleepers on Yahoo for categories and sleepers on ESPN for categories and points for Yahoo and points for ESPN and categories on Fantrax, it all appears, makes me go, maybe I am misreading this. Maybe he's going to play 24 minutes a night behind Jordan Clarkson. But mid-season, they switched that up, and that's not what they did. And I don't know whether he gets traded on. He's like 25, Sexton. Or maybe I'm just misreading that if I'm just everyone else is different to where I sit on that. That is, keep that in mind too. That can be a red, and that sets a red flag off in my mind. I go, maybe I am out. Maybe I'm wrong on Sexton. Maybe I'm just missing something completely. But I'm going to keep putting it out there until something clicks in my head to suggest that he's a 25-minute a night bench player. Because I don't think that, and I don't like Colin Sexton as a player. I don't think he's very good. Which has gotten me into trouble in the past. Shout out to Chris Duarte or Sadiq Bey. Oh, they're fine. Take them in the last round. Hate them as players, but the team seems to like them. Maybe that's going to get me in trouble in that one as well. Malik Monk sits again at a weird spot here, 132 for his ADP. His rank is 123. Andrew Wiggins is a 140 rank. Again, that's very, very low, man. And what about Mark Williams? I know I get this one with Mark Williams. I know he missed time with the back injury. But Willow's got an ADP of 126. His rank is 107, Mark Williams. Hopefully, we're able to get a full season out of him. Maybe we don't. I don't know. But he averaged almost 34 ESPN points a game last season, which was top 85. So yeah, I'd be all right getting him at 126. I'd feel pretty good about that. And I don't really think that injury risk is something that I care about. At that spot in the draft, like that is immense value. Immense. Trey Murphy's got an ADP of 128. So much confusion still in New Orleans, so I understand that part of it. He was, 104th last season, so still better than this. But I'm hoping we get a little bit more from him. And then we get to Alex Caruso, who is a better category league player than points league guy. But I think this has gone just a little bit too far with Caruso because he's sitting there with, last season Caruso was 102nd, 30 fantasy points a game. He's ranked 146 on his new team, the Thunder. And yeah, he probably plays a little bit less for Oklahoma City. He averaged 10, 4, and 3.5 with 1.7 steals and a block. His shooting was pretty good. And remember, there are some efficiency penalties on ESPN scoring. And steals and blocks are valued more. 33% higher than what they're valued on Yahoo. But 146 rank for Caruso just, you'd be shocked to know, doesn't make sense to me. Don't really understand why it sits there. Ready for some more? We got more. Ivica Zubac has got an ADP of 127. That suggests last pick in a regular draft there. Absolutely not. We're doing better than that. Middleton again, the same story. 105 ADP, 195 rank. Chris Paul with an ADP of 114 and a rank of 116. Yeah, I know Chris Paul's a million years old and Chris Paul is going to miss some time. Last season, Chris Paul was 107th, playing like 26 minutes a night as a reserve in Golden State, and I don't think he's a reserve in San Antonio. So I'm very happy to take Chris Paul there. And much like I'm very happy to take RJ Barrett, I didn't want to turn this into the RJ Barrett show, but here we are. Barrett on ESPN scoring averaged almost 32 fantasy points, which was top 85. He's ranked at 85, which is about fine, with an ADP of 97. But I actually think he's way better than that this season. I think he's probably going to push top 65. I think. And then LaMelo Ball, the reasons for this one are obvious, but that is too far. ADP of 40, a rank of 31. No way. That is just too far. And you won't want to do that for him in the first round. I understand that part of it. You probably may not consider him in the second round. LaMelo Ball averaged 45.5 fantasy points last season. I think he can actually improve on that. And I get why he's down that low. I just think it is pushing it down too far. The next batch of guys we're going to talk about are not based off the ranks. These are based off the way the ADP sits. So that's sort of trying to see like the differences between different drafts and where people are picking these players on ESPN. Because Derek White, his ADP is 76. There are times when Derek White is drafted too high, and I've said that many times. But he was a top 60 guy in fantasy points leagues on ESPN last season. He is going to have no Porzingis to begin the year. So I feel, 76 is pretty good. Zion at 45 is an absolute no-brainer to me. Tobias Harris at 95. You might not like Tobias. You might think he's boring. I think he's boring. I think he's very boring. But I think he's going to have an opportunity to do better than he did last season, where he was a top 70 player in ESPN points leagues. So yeah, like if I'm getting at 95, I'm going to feel very, very good about that. And I guess the ESPN ADP and the ESPN drafters are worried about the Villanova Knicks and how Julius Randle might get shut out because he doesn't even go here. Because he's got an ADP of 78 for a guy that was 43rd last season and a guy that shot 20% from the rim for about the first 15 games. Yusuf Nurkic sits at 110 as an ADP. You might not like Nurk, but you can't argue this part. He was 75th in ESPN points per game last season. Maybe he sees a downturn. That's possible. I don't think that Mason Plumlee is anywhere near as good as Yusuf Nurkic. Yusuf Nurkic's advanced defensive numbers were unbelievable last season. And I know that doesn't translate necessarily into fantasy stats, but it means that there's value in him on the court. And now we get Mike Budenholzer that maybe opens up some offense for him. I just know that at 110, that is just like, that's dart throw territory in a lot of spots. And I don't think Nurkic is much of a dart throw. Anthony Simons sits at 108. I don't even know why that would be the case. 65th last season. Got injured in game 1 of the season. The team is bad. Maybe he is traded. Getting him being at 108 is like, how do I explain that? I can't. Look, that's simple. Same with Cam Thomas, who was 93rd last season. His ADP is 90. Now, I do get it. There are efficiency penalties on ESPN. But I think his volume is going to outweigh this. Now, I don't look at this one as like as much of a difference as the Yahoo one, but I still think that is pretty crazy. Miles Turner, another one where the ADP just doesn't work for me. He was a top 70 per game player last season. His ADP is 87. Should be able to beat that number, I'd say. What about the Jalen Bronco? What about the Bronco? Jalen Williams. ESPN's current prediction would suggest that he's going to be identical to last season. His ADP is 53. Guess where he finished last season? 53rd. Yeah, okay, so that's year 3 for Jalen Williams without Josh Giddey, so he's not improving at all. I think he's improving a lot. Very happy to take him at 53. And then Cade Cunningham sits with an ADP of 49. Cade, of course, had some struggles early last season and the team was pretty bad. And he still finished 39th per game. He could crack the top 25, but at ADP 49, he probably doesn't even need to get that value. The last 5 names we're going to talk about here on ESPN. The big fella himself, again, Jordan Poole. Just positioned too low. The hate on Jordan Poole continues to go too far, I think. Now, in fairness, Jordan Poole's ADP is at 100. Last season, he finished 111th per game. So he actually was lower than this. So I get it. I think that the whole season production from Poole is probably not supremely indicative of what his season's going to look like. For example, the last 2 weeks of last season, he averaged 45 ESPN fantasy points and he was 25th. I'm not saying that he's going to be 25th, but I'm feeling more confidence that he beats 100. The bucket, John Kuminga, has an ADP at 90. I think that, again, someone's going to take on Klay Thompson's shots. It's probably Kuminga. Now, Kuminga was only 129th last season. He's up to 90, so that is an improvement. I just think there's actually more that he can go from there. Jarrett Allen's at 83. Centers in points leagues usually just aren't that exciting. But he was a top 50 producer. Why is he going at 83? He's not been traded. He just signed an extension. This is the easy money stuff that you can do. Nick Claxton, an ADP of 81. Now, Claxton, there is a bit of a risk that maybe he is traded at some point. Maybe he cedes minutes down the stretch to Day'Ron Sharpe, maybe. But he had an undoubted down year last season, Clacko, and he was 63rd. Cool. You take 20 spots where you can get it. If you can get 20 spots of perceived value that might go higher, well, you take it. And the last one we want to talk about here is Jakob Poeltl, who, in a season that was mid-ish, which was fine, he was 80th. His ADP is 102. Again, we just take the value. If we're getting 20 spots of value with every pick that we make, and then we get Jalen Johnson and Isaiah Hartenstein, pretty hard to beat that. In fact, I would suggest that it is nigh on impossible. And that there are points league sleepers. And I am not covering sleeper leagues because they are obviously a very different setup. It's a terrible setup, and sleeper needs to change the way that they approach things. Their scoring system is also, their default scoring system is insane. It's so bad. Their UI is great. That's true. But they refuse to make any sort of meaningful changes or options on their basketball side. So I'm just not going to talk about... And also, their ADP data is just not easy to find. And I'm just not going to do it. Sorry. Guys, don't forget to follow this show. Give us a thumb. Give us a subscribe. And, of course, leave those comments. Which one of those 70-ish names, if there was more than one, let me know that as well. Which one of those guys did you think, Josh, no, that's actually fine and they're not a sleeper? Actually, maybe you're wrong. Which one of those guys did you think? I can see some arguments that you might have for some of them. Some of them, there's no way you can argue it, and that's okay. Follow, subscribe, blah, blah, blah. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.